The International Democratic Union, an organization that promotes open and free democratic societies across the globe, is demanding the release of Tanzania's Chadema party leader Freeman Mbowe. We caught up with the union's Secretary General Christian Katner, and this is what he had to say about the state of affairs in Tanzania. Christian, quite a sad state of affairs in Tanzania. What do you make of the recent arrest of Chadema's opposition party leader, Freeman Mbowe, and 10 other party members?
As you know, I'm representing the International Democrat Union as its Secretary General. And IDU, our organization, is having a long-standing close partnership relationship with the Chadema party. And therefore, we are very much concerned what just happened at the party level over the weekend when the party had its gathering regarding a discussion on constitutional reforms. And the latest incidents when, as you mentioned, Chairman Freeman Mbowe was arrested, including some other top-level party representatives. This is a crackdown on democracy movements in Tanzania again. And what's so concerning, it's a continuing pattern, what we've already seen in the last election campaign in Tanzania. And therefore, for us, it's to raise our voice to not let the country drift into authoritarianism completely.
Well, Christian, as you may already know, Freeman Mbowe is facing new charges relating to terrorism. Do you think they hold any water?
Well, this is a tough charge for something that's actually must be considered a basic right to discuss politics norms. And you come along as a government and hit this person with you silenced him. And the terrorism charge is just to silence all independent and democracy-loving voices. So I don't know if as old water surrounding should be possible to discuss changes on your constitution, discuss developments in civil society in your country without facing any restraints, obstructions coming from a government. And if you see the circumstances, while people from Chadema, including Freeman Mbowe, just have been arrested and disappeared, this is a kind of behavior from let's call it Big Brother behavior from George Orwell's 1984. We want to control everything and we silence everything by immediate and brutal charges. This is something I don't think in a normal judicial system, these charges will not hold water.
Well, Christian, let's talk about the shrinking space of democracy in Tanzania. This is not the first time we're seeing, cracking down on opposition party members. It's not only the case here where we see a violation of human rights in Tanzania. I mean, what are your thoughts about the current shrinking space of democracy in the country?
Well, it's so striking to see in Tanzania, the public and the civil society space is shrinking over the last years. It's not only my personal impression, well, we can rely on data coming from international organizations doing these surveys, like Human Rights Watch, like Reporters Without Frontiers. This is probably the most significant one I would like to stress, where you can see that the freedom of press in Tanzania coming from 2013 has dropped by 50 steps since 2020. And you're ranking now around place 124 out of 180. This is so hard to see where so many people are interested in politics. They want to engage, but they don't have an opportunity in the broad scale of the country. And you see the party of the former President Magufuli, the CCM had no problems in holding their rallies. While you have seen Chadema's rallies with Tundu Lissu in the last campaign have been obstructed, hindered, and delayed in all causes. This is something that's a pattern again to see to keep the power close to the government and not being willing to share this with the people in the end. And that's actually democracy. You just rented the power of government for time, and you have to stand up in a free and fair election to regain the power. And obstructing your opponent is definitely the hardest way to keep your power. And in addition, you shrink down the civil society and the public spaces for this. This is heartbreaking. And I hope that there will be kind of an understanding for the need to stand up and fight for these freedoms and not to deteriorate into a Big Brother situation like in George Orwell's 1984.
Christian, the issue of human rights violations is not a new story in Tanzania. This has been recurrent with the different regimes of the country. Why would you say, perhaps in your view, is the reason why Tanzania has taken so long to at least achieve, a protection and a clear protection of human rights?
I don't have the insight of the thinking of the leadership in there, but it's maintaining power. So you keep the power close to yours and your clan and your ideas, and you are not willing to share. This is probably the hardest lesson from democracy, that you have just a limited time to rule and to govern, and then you have to share this again. And the sharing of government is secured through human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of press, and all these guaranteeing the change of power. But if you don't want to change power and want to give up power, then you restrict these kind of rights, and therefore, in the end, the whole society is suffering.
Talk about the organization of which you are the Secretary General, that's the International Democratic Union. I would like to hear from you. Do you have any plans perhaps to intervene in the case of Freeman Mbowe's arrest and also the arrest of the 10 other members of the party?
As you said, we're an international organization with 80 members parties around the globe, coming from the US, Europe, Latin America, Australia, all around the world, and including Africa with Chadema and others. We will definitely stand up for our members and partners. We will address these violations, and we will kind of support them as we, for example, supported Tundu Lissu in its last campaign. We thought actually Chadema did a very tremendous job in taking up a fight against overstretching and too strong opponent, and therefore but keeping up the principles of freedom and democracy. And therefore, for example, we awarded Tundu Lissu and the Chadema party with our Freedom Award from Mrs. Thatcher and George W. Bush. So we have this award to help them to get international awareness. We get this award to those who really sacrifice their lives and their own beliefs. So, and this is something where we can help to create international awareness. Besides this, we have partners and friends to support the work on the ground. And this is something to make a election campaign easier. And without election campaigns, we will definitely put our finger in the wounds if something is going wrong, and we will address this issue to the Human Rights Committee of the European Parliament. We address this to the US Congress. We go out and help our friends who are suffering to get the necessary awareness.
Well, Kristen, I have a question that I think I've had so many people asking. The intervention of the International Criminal Court. We haven't had much from the court on the human rights violations that have been going on in Tanzania. What do you think about this?
It's a pity. It's definitely something that needs to be highest priority of the International Criminal Court. And we have, I don't have insights why there is a delay on that, but I would urge the court to speed up their findings, and it's too important, this matter of human rights violations, just to keep this on a long judicial way, waiting and getting lost in time. Therefore, I cannot interfere into an independent court, but I understand the need for a decision that's coming up shortly.
IDU has worked with various countries, going about reading a little bit about the IDU, success stories from various leaders and organizations talking about the way you have helped various countries achieve democracy. How do you go about working with the various countries that are members of IDU towards achieving democracy within their institutions?
We have, for example, in Africa, we have a very strong and successful partner in Ghana. The NPP from Ghana has proven to win in a democratic way election and guarantee a transfer of power in a peaceful manner. This is something that is actually the ideal space, the ideal setting for democracies. And I think this is benefiting especially the people of the country. If someone is winning a democratic election, then transfer it. And then you can be a kind of a lighthouse for other countries where you might face more violent transfers. Or what is actually striking for me in Africa is the Malawi situation, where you have where we have had fraudulent election in Malawi, and the Constitutional Court ruled out this election wrong and fraudulent, and they rerun the election. And in the end, the party that has asked for this rerun, and they have been betrayed in the first one, had the possibility to win the election. Therefore, the Malawi Congress Party is also one of these significant examples where democracy can prevail if all three institutions, legislation, executive branch, and judicial branch, work on equal terms together. And IDU is kind of fostering this balance of power among our members and the countries they are living in. And let me be blunt, it's not easy, and it's not effective in every case, but maybe the NPP in Ghana and the Malawi Congress Party in Malawi are the best examples how you can run elections in a democratic manner, and that is benefiting the country and all the people. And I want to stress all the people, not only one side of the country. Well, personally, we are not on the ground. We are having our partners on the ground. So preserving democracy is creating international awareness and attention. And this, especially in the case of Tanzania, this goes back a couple of years already. For example, the assassination attempt on Tundu Lissu in front of the parliament, the assassination attempt on Freeman Mbowe, the election campaign. So we give them additional space and international awareness so that their cases will not be lost, and they can make their pledge for a better world, a better society in Tanzania.
You know, looking at how the Chadema party leader has been very passionate about the push for a new constitution, or rather a constitutional change in the country, I mean, what do you make of this push? How important is it for Tanzania?
I must have a little caveat here. I'm not a constitutional lawyer for Tanzanian constitutional law, but having experience in a lot of countries around the globe where the constitution is serving all people in the country, the whole society. And what I've learned from Tanzania, the current constitution is kind of being the fig leaf for the government to justify their behavior, and it's not serving the people, it's serving the government. And therefore I can understand the need for a reform of a constitution. A constitution is a basic law that's guaranteeing your fundamental, your core rights. And these are kind of indisputable, like the freedom of press, the human rights, you name it. And that's the pattern of an authoritarian regime. They misuse the constitution and their provisions only to justify their action. And if we identify this, there's a need to rediscuss the provisions of the constitution. And from a perfect understanding, from my understanding of freedom and democracy, all people in Tanzania should discuss this. This should not be left to one side. And as I understand Chadema, they wanted to open up this discussion about a new constitution. They invited friends, members, but also not aligned people to discuss these matters of a new constitution that is benefiting the whole country. And therefore, the approach, I think, is brilliant. The approach is the right way. The approach is to integrate all people from Tanzania in a process that is a kind of unifying and covering the scars from past election campaigns, from past obstructions and atrocities we have seen. And I think a new constitutional reform is a kind of a healing for a society.
When you look at the case of Tanzania and the push for a new constitution, there has been a lot of resistance, like we've talked about. Seems like in Africa, it is always the same case in most African countries. Getting a constitution change always ends up in riots on the streets and sometimes in very sad situations, bloodshed. What have you been doing as IDU to address this?
Well, we always ask for our members to stand up for their rights to have their rights to freedom of expression, but in a peaceful manner. And this is something, it's maybe a little bit cultural and difficult to keep these personal restraint and not act violently when you have been oppressed for years and they have been going after your family, and you have a possibility now to address your causes. It's hard to stay peaceful and restrained. And sometimes it's even harder when police forces and others are kind of going violently against peaceful demonstrators. I can understand, especially young people, when they kind of retaliate, but IDU urges all of his friends and members to stay peaceful, because only in a peaceful manner we can change a society for the better course. We don't want to act violently as probably an authoritarian regime is acting. Let me just make a comparison to another country that was very much striking me throughout the years, and this is Venezuela. Venezuela is in Latin America, and there's a dictatorship, and they have been violently oppressing the opposition. And at one point, the opposition turned violently as well. But in the end, it was not a gain for any side. Well, the government stayed in power and the opposition was just beaten down. And as you mentioned, it ended in a bloodshed. So this experience is not only in Africa, this is all around the globe. We need to stay strong, focused, and even if it's hard sometimes, to stay peaceful and non-violent. And that's our approach to this.
You've mentioned Venezuela, so it seems like the issue of intimidation of the opposition is not just in Africa, like you mentioned. When we look at some of the issues of social justice, freedom of speech and democracy in East Africa, which countries would you say are doing well in terms of protecting these rights?
Well, I'm not too deep into all of those countries, but I see that the good causes, or well, it's not Eastern Africa, it's from the West. I think Ghana is a very significant example where you can execute democratic rights and have a peaceful power transition. This is something that should be the lighthouse for all of us in Africa. It's possible. And well, street fighting is not helping anyone. But we, on the other side, have to guarantee that the oppressed oppositions, which are suffering from authoritarian regimes, need public awareness, and therefore organizations like the IDU, but also others, non-partisan organizations like the Human Rights Watch or Reporters Without Frontiers, are helping to transport this mission. And in the end, the African Union needs to stand up to defend these values as well, all over Africa. And you should definitely make pledges to the international community to safeguard these rights.
Christian, I spoke to the former Tanganyika Law Society president, Fatma Karume, not too long ago, and she did mention to me that she believes that Tanzania will never move forward until the country gets a new constitution. But yet we're seeing the kind of things that are happening against the opposition. We're trying to push for constitutional change. In addition to the work that IDU is doing right now, what do you think that the rest of the international community can do to help you in addressing the human rights violations, especially against the opposition in Tanzania?
We have a lot of ambassadors from the US, from the European countries. The European Union has its own representation there. They also need to stand up and defend these core values of human rights, of freedom and democracy. This is something we only can do together to fight authoritarian structures. The IDU itself is kind of on the party level organized. We have NGOs who are better organized in social society manners. We have the international communities on the ambassadors level, but all have to work together to address this and make the pledge for a new constitution in Tanzania to make a better life for all Tanzanians, to create a better life for all Tanzanians.
Finally, Christian, I'd like you to speak to the Tanzanians who, perhaps at this moment, you know, with what is happening right now against the opposition, I want you to speak to them right now. What will be your message to the Tanzanians at this moment?
Tanzania is at a crucial point of society development. Currently, we see a continued drift into authoritarianism. The new president had her chance when she took over from the former President Magufuli to change the former patterns, the former autocratic manners, and she now has to deliver, and she can prove that there's a development towards freedom, democracy, real participation of all parts of the Tanzanian society. And she needs to understand that oppressing a discussion about the constitution is not helping in the long run. Maybe in the short run, she can suppress the development of an independent mind and the development of a new constitution. But in the long run, all authoritarian regimes will suffer. Best example is right now, maybe it took a little bit too long, but it's the Cuban regime that is struggling after almost 70 years. So even if it takes so long, the idea of freedom and independence of a society will prevail. And it's up to the leadership of Tanzania to work together with the opposition and develop a joint constitution that is serving all parts of the society and can, in the end, also start building up wealth and development, prosperity in the country. And this is kind of the peaceful way to move forward. But on the other side, the opposition, and especially Chadema, they need to stay strong. They cannot let the government go away with these authoritarian behavior, abducting people at night, pressing charges that are completely ridiculous, like terrorism against Freeman Mbowe. And we will definitely help them to make their pledge to the international community. They will not get away as they have been getting away last time under Magufuli when they have the fraudulent elections last year.
Christian Katner, the Secretary General of the International Democratic Union, thank you so much for making time and shedding light on the state of affairs in Tanzania.